Hello, 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 friend, and welcome to this fabulous episode of the SpeechGoods podcast where I have the one and only Shelby Ford from Shelby the SLP, as many of you probably know her from her amazing Instagram profile. So, Shelby and I are actually going to have like a legitimate topic of conversation. You know how sometimes you listen to the show and we just get a little bit like in like a few different rabbit holes and whatnot. We actually did a pretty good job this time at attempting to stay on what we said we were going to talk about. So, we are going to dive into a great conversation about how to choose a work setting. We talk about things like independent contracting, we talk about finding what your passion is in different specialty areas. So, a lot of great stuff is definitely covered in this episode. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about Shelby. So, Shelby, of course, is an SLP. She's out of New Jersey and she currently works as an independent contractor for a private practice with kids that are around ages 2 to 9. She mainly treats speech sound disorders and early language. She's also trained in oral facial myofunctional therapy and is in the process of obtaining her QOM. That is, if you didn't know, that's one of the certifications that you can get through the AOMT, which is one of the certifying bodies for myofunctional therapy. So she also started her Instagram page and her TPT store in 2020. And what was started as her COVID passion project has actually turned into a full-fledged small business. You know, your girl Danni loves a nice side hustle. Come on, let's go. And while she stays busy with being a full-time SLP and small business owner, she values her work-life balance and encourages other SLPs to find a setting that works for them, make the necessary changes they need to better their quality of life, and take that leap of faith and never say never. So I really think you're going to like this episode and this conversation with Shelby. She actually talks about her even transitioning into independent contracting. She talks about some experiences at some previous jobs. So if you just kind of want to hear some good discussion and like a real story and not all that like fluffy butt stuff that a lot of people try to pass off as real and that's aggravating, you're going to want to listen to this interview. Okay. All right. Let's get to our chat with Shelby. Hello, 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 Shelby. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm so good. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, yes. And so, for those of you who do not know Shelby, actually, a lot of you probably do know Shelby because she is making quite the whirlwind. I can't say that whirlwind in the Instagram space with all of her fabulous speech therapy tips. But I actually got multiple requests to have you on and to interview you. So, I just had to make it happen, girl. I did.
Well, thank you to whoever was requesting me because I'm a fan of speech goods and always have been. So I'm excited to be here.
Oh, SpeechGoods loves them some Shelby SLP, but we'll just table that for now. But one really awesome thing is that we are going to have Shelby on today to talk about a very specific topic, and this was actually an idea that Shelby had to talk about on the podcast, and so really looking into figuring out what setting you want to be in as a speech pathologist, and honestly, I feel like this even applies to you if you are an OT, or a PT. Because what was it that you said, Shelby? Like once you pick a setting, it's like, oh my gosh, this is my life.
Yes, like when I was trying to choose a CF, I'm like, I have to choose what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And it's like, no, that's not true.
That's what it can feel like, especially for your CF. Now, I really think that no matter where you are in your career, you can, I mean, that's one of the great things about SLP is that you can change settings. So if you get tired of one setting, there's so many different settings that we work in and populations we work with that you can change. But I think people kind of think of that as more of like thinking of getting in your setting for your CF, but it's really something that can just occur throughout your career.
Right. Like I feel like we got to remind ourselves it's not like medical school where you have to choose like what is going to be your specialty for life. Like you can always we can always change, and then even within the settings that we choose there's so many routes to take within each setting too. Like it's really endless learning opportunities.
I love how you phrase that. It's endless learning opportunities. That was such like a glass half full way to explain that. I love it. But before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of that question, I did want to kind of ask you, Shelby, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that we've heard your bio, but tell us like what is going on? What's going on with you in life right now? I know that you're doing TPT, you are independent contracting, but give us a little bit of background info on you so that we kind of know where you're coming from as we delve into this topic.
Yeah. So I am on year 3 of being an SLP. So I graduated from grad school in 2019, and I started, like 2 months after I graduated. Um, and I'm in my second job, and we'll get into that. And yeah, I live in northern New Jersey, so I'm about an hour from New York City. And yeah, I'm just enjoying right now having the time to enjoy life outside of being an SLP and growing a lot as an SLP in areas that I was really hoping to get more into. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So are you like specializing right now? Or like, can you tell us how that's kind of looking for you?
Yes, I wasn't sure if we were going to get right into that or not. Yes, so I switched settings because I really wanted to get more into speech sound disorders, which I really didn't learn that much about in grad school. I didn't get a lot of experience with that in grad school, and I would have never guessed that I would choose speech sound disorders to be like my thing. But I've been really getting into that. And even within speech sound disorders, there's so many things to learn within it. Like right now, I'm working with my first cleft speech client, learning a lot about apraxia, learning a lot about oral facial myology, which, is its own thing. But I'm in my process of getting my QOM right now. So I've just been learning a lot about speech science, really. And I think it's the science side that really draws me in. And I just love it. I think that's kind of where my heart is right now, but you never know, it could change. I don't think it will, but
And
that's where
that's
I am right
okay.
now.
Yes, yeah. So you're kind of in a more just the setting that you're in. Are you working for someone else's private practice?
Yes. So I'm an independent contractor for a private practice. And so all of my clients, I think some people get confused too, because yes, I'm an independent contractor. It's for the clinic though. And I do go into preschools, but the parents are paying me directly for that. So we have a relationship with the preschool where if there's a teacher who's like, I think I'm going to talk to this child's parents about their speech, then the school will say, okay, well, you can talk to them about that. And we usually refer to this practice, and then we'll get a call from the parent directly. So the school kind of funnels clients to us, but then after that, it's all through the parents. And so the parents pay me to see their kids at school. The
Got
school
you.
just, knows who I am, knows I'm coming in, gives me a space to treat, etc.
That's a cool setup. So the school's kind of it's
Yeah.
basically like it's allowing you on campus to it's a referral source and allowing you on campus and allowing you on the campus so that you're able to see the kids while they're at school, which I know can be a huge help for parents because
Yes. Yes, it is. And a lot of them, it's nice for them to be able to have that choice. And the schools, I love being able to have a relationship with the teachers. And I liked that part because I have been in the schools before. And I like that part. I like that I still kind of get that without all the extra paperwork and meetings and all of that stuff. And I actually was recently just asked if I would be available in June to talk with all of the teachers at that school for what to look for and like what to know in order to refer a kid for speech, whether that's for a speech sound disorder or language, whatever it may be. So I'm actually going to be talking to all of the teachers at one of the schools I go to. So I'm kind of getting more involved with that without even being an employee of the school, which is kind of cool.
oh my gosh, Shelby, you're so fancy. What? But
Yeah,
it
maybe talk
sounds
to me afterwards and see how it goes.
it sounds like the setting you're in is offering a lot of really interesting opportunities that it's what you wanted. I know you had mentioned to me before we even started recording that you get to the scheduling is a little bit more flexible. So can you tell us a little bit like why and how did you choose the setting that you're in now? Because you've been in other settings, but kind of like how did you get to choose the setting that you're in?
Yeah. I think it's a good point that you said right now through the setting that I'm in, I'm getting a lot of really cool opportunities. I feel like in this setting, I can be a sponge that's just kind of absorbing anything that I can do and learn from. And I'm not in a, glass box being looked at and only have a few places that I can go and only a few things that I can learn about and XYZ. So I did start working at a clinic that was also contracting with schools. So I had a full school caseload. And at that job, I technically was an independent contractor for the school. So I was their sole SLP. I was, case manager. I had all the paperwork. It was a school SLP job. It was just that I was employed through the clinic and I also had a full clinic caseload. So it was just a lot. But when I was graduated from grad school, that's when I was having that like, what setting am I going to choose? Like, this is going to be what I'm going to do for my life. So I wanted to choose a setting that would give me the most variety. And it did, but it also gave me the most overwhelm. So I kind of funneled my way into my current situation just by figuring out through those first 2 years, even with a global pandemic, what am I liking? What am I not liking? What's working for me? What's making me feel and find success, and what is like really pulling me down and pulling me away from loving my job. So it was a really good opportunity for me to have a CF that had so many areas and so many things to it. I was in a multidisciplinary clinic, so I got that experience working with other disciplines. And then I had the school side of things. But I think ultimately, all of those things together wasn't for me. So at first, I thought I wanted all of the variety because I just liked so many different things. And what it really came down to was, well, maybe I just really like I think I'm really just starting to like speech sound disorders the most. And I had a client who I had to refer out because I was seeing signs of some myofunctional issues and we hadn't been making any progress. And it ended up being a good referral because he actually did need oral facial myofunctional therapy. I had never learned about that before. And so I started looking into that a little bit. And that was when I was really like, I'm really liking speech sound disorders and I want more cases like this. And I want to learn more about speech science and I want to really learn more about that. But it's really hard to know everything about every area when you're doing multiple different things. Like I feel for school SLPs because they are doing it all, really doing it all. And I think for me, I'm pretty open about this on my Instagram too. I have ADHD and I get like very overwhelmed with all of that, all of the different things and trying to stay on top of everything. And I just constantly felt like I was drowning trying to do it all. And I was starting to really find joy and success in certain areas. And I think I was kind of like, you know what? I really want to learn more about speech sound disorders right now. I want to dive into that. And I want to see if I can find something closer to where I live that will give me more opportunities so I can grow in this area. And so I started to look and research the clinics that were near where I live right now. And I really just started to like almost cold call people. Like I just sent out my resume and cover letter to clinics that looked like they had what I was looking for. And I found the one that I have right now. And it really was all about oral facial myology and speech sound disorders. And I was like, well, that is really perfect. And the staff on the clinic website all had a lot of experience. They had all been working together for like 20 years. And I thought that was a huge plus. That is one thing that I always tell people to ask for in interviews is to ask about turnover rate and to like look at what staff is there and do the staff there, like, do they have a bunch of certifications that you hope to get one day? Like, are there people that you can learn from and kind of be mentored by? And that was something that I was looking for. So that's kind of where I landed in my current setting, because that the clinic where I am now, I sent her my resume and cover letter at Saturday night at like 9:45, and I was like, she is going to think I'm some weirdo who is up at 9:45 on a Saturday night sending her like just randomly sending a cover letter and resume talking about how much I really like what their website says. And she actually got back to me the next morning, and we were on Zoom 3 days after that. I was in the clinic checking it out 2 days after that. And the next morning I was out for the job. So everything happened in the whirlwind of like a week. And it was kind of like, oh no, like, what did I just do? What am I doing? Like, I hope that this works out because it is independent contracting. And I was a salaried employee before. So I had no idea what that was going to look like. And it is a big risk being an independent contractor because you don't have a set amount of income. I didn't know what it was going to look like. And I wasn't sure if it was going to work out, but I just had a gut feeling. And everyone in my life that I told about the decision, they all were like, go for it. And no one was like, maybe be careful. And I saw that as a sign too. So now I am, and that was a really long answer to say that, yeah, now I am an independent contractor for a clinic. And I am able to really specialize in speech sound disorders and early language. I love my little ones. And that has been really cool. And I've gotten some opportunities to learn about areas that I didn't even know would come up, like cleft speech and apraxia. And that has been really cool. And I mean, I think the really big plus for me personally, I'm trying to remember all the parts of this question. But I think the really big plus for me personally too is that I did start my Instagram page as my COVID passion project in April of 2020. And it was, we can talk about how I started that. We can get into that. But that was important to me too, to be in a place where whoever I was working with, they, respected that as pretty much a part-time job for me too. And that I do have this teachers pay teachers store, and that I do want to have a more flexible schedule so that I can attend to my business. I just recently, as of last week, got an LLC for my business. So so I'm like moving and grooving, figuring out how to have a small business and how to make that work while also being a full-time SLP.
But I think that's really important for the point that you made about, I think a lot of people, when they ask the question of like, what setting should I choose? Instead of saying, what setting should I choose? You really need to think about, what do you want out of a setting? Because at that point, then it's going to be much easier for you to pick one setting. There's no right or wrong to a setting, right? It's really just about what it is that you want out of it. And it sounds like that's what you did. It sounds like you knew, okay, I want flexibility. I want something closer to my house. I want something that I'm not treating every single kid for every single disorder, because that overwhelmed me. Okay, what are the settings that can offer me that? And then you took the initiative to, because girl, the last job that I had, that I did the exact same thing. Nobody was hiring. I did the same thing, girl. So I feel you. I called and I emailed my resume and cover letter, which, by the way, y'all, like, that is actually a really great way to show initiative, is to, if there's a practice or somewhere around that you want to work, because kind of like what you said, Shelby, like, you knew that you could tell it was just like a high quality place to work. Just because they're not hiring doesn't mean they're not hiring. Like, you picking up what I'm putting down?
Yeah. Oh, they were fully not hiring. Like, she was like, I do not have a caseload for you. I don't. I have to be honest, like this is a big risk. And she was kind of talking to me. She has a daughter who's around my age. So she did have kind of that mom nervousness about it too. Like, I really want this to work for you because I really want you at my practice. But I also want to look out for you, make sure that you're going to be okay. And I was like, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to take this leap of faith. And if it works out, then it's going to be awesome. And if it doesn't, then we'll go from there. But so far, so good.
So like it's still working out.
Yeah, you got to take the risks sometimes.
Exactly. And tell us, you touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear from you and your experience of dealing, because this is a question I get a lot, whether it's someone who's going from a salary position to an IC, an independent contractor, someone who's going from a salary position to starting their own private practice, which is similar, as in like, if kids don't show up or if you don't have sessions, like you don't make no money. So how have you made that transition just like mentally, emotionally, and even financially?
So I think for me, like I said, this was not a position that was on Indeed or anywhere else. And it's not like they plastered on their website that they're independent contractors, you know? So I really had no idea. I think I just wanted it so bad. Like, I just wanted to work there so badly and wanted to learn more about that. And was also just at a place of total burnout and just was not in a good headspace. And I was just like, I knew I needed a change. So I was very much like, something has to change. And this just really feels right. And I'm going to do it. Um, and I talked to family. I have some family that are in sales. My dad was in sales my whole life. So um, a lot of that is independent contracting. So I kind of had to ask them some questions, but it was kind of like, well, if other people can do it, then why can't I? Um, and even, my boyfriend too, I was kind of like, we have rent to pay. Like, what's going to happen? And everybody was just kind of like, we'll figure it out. We're going to figure it out. And so that helped me. But I also don't like not knowing what's ahead. But, you do kind of have to save money a little bit at the beginning when you're figuring it out and growing a caseload. And it's been a switch, not having a set, I'm going to get a check for X amount of money every 2. I get paid monthly now. But the reality of it was that I took what my paychecks were. Like, I really dove into what my salary was giving me at my last job and what this new clinic was offering me, even as like that per session rate. And I, it just really came down to like, I am working so much. It was the epitome of being overworked and underpaid versus what work can I put in and I will get paid what I'm worth by what I'm doing. And that was attractive to me, just being like, well, if I'm in charge of how much I want to make based off of how many clients I want to take and what I want my schedule to look like, of course, you never know what's going to happen with spring breaks and cancellations and sicknesses. And you never know exactly how many sessions you're going to have in a week. But there is kind of a method to the madness where you can try to plan it out and be like, all right, I need at least X amount of sessions per week to pay the bare minimum of things that I need for a month, So it was just some math and planning to be like, this can work. I can do that. And I also have those other streams of income too. And so when my caseload was really light, I was able to put more time into my Teachers Pay Teachers store or like, put more into Instagram. And I don't make a whole lot of money off of Instagram, but there are some perks with that. And I really just like the community, the networking, and just like the learning that can happen. And it's a huge creative outlet for me. And that just helps me, how they say practice at the top of your license. I feel like this job helps me be able to do that because I'm not so like my cup isn't so empty that I'm able to take in a little bit more.
You just spoke like all my love languages at once. Like you talked about multiple streams of income, you talked about doing the math, which all of those are super important. I think we can get very intimidated by those types of things. But it's kind of like it's always scary when you don't know or understand it. Like it's scary if you just think of the idea, oh, I was getting this exact amount every 2 weeks and now I'm not going to be getting that. But at the same time, if you just kind of break it down and do your numbers, like one thing I talk about in the Budget Without Burden course is calculating a cancellation rate. Like you can factor in, I know a lot of practices will do like budget essentially off of a 15% cancellation rate. So if you know that you've got on average, I don't know, 30 sessions a week, whatever, I'm just making up a number. Well, then you can factor in like what you're planning your monthly budget off of. You can just take, however much you make off of those 30 sessions, just take away 15% of that. And that's what I'd probably base my monthly budget off of. And then
Right.
if you make more than that, well, great. Go put your money towards something else. But if you do have some kids that cancel, you're not like running around like, oh my gosh, I won't be able to pay my water bill. I'm dying.
Right. Yeah. Like I have never had that experience yet. I don't think that it will happen. But luckily, I haven't had any money scare from being an independent contractor. And I think that scares people into it a lot. And of course, I don't have PTO and I don't have benefits, but I pay my health insurance and I just factor everything in and it just it is what it is. And for me, I know it isn't the case with all positions, but I am making way more and being able to give higher quality services now. And I'm not working, 12-hour days, 5 days a week. It's like I'm working actual less hours, but it's just a much better fit for me.
And I really love, you're actually the second person that I've had on the show talk about independent contracting. And I want to highlight because, and look, this is something all of you were thinking out there. So listen quick, okay? You do not have to be married on your spouse's insurance and benefits plan to be an independent contractor. I just said it. I'm just saying it because that is a thing in our field. It's a thing. I think it's like a therapy field thing because we're mostly women, but I feel like so many of us are afraid to take on that kind of and not a less like predictable position if we unless like we're oh well, I'll just take that independent contractor job when I find a man or whatever. I'm like, girl,
Right.
come on now. But
Yeah.
in all seriousness, you just have to plan. Like I really love how you brought up the point of like you knew what your insurance was going to cost, you knew what like all these other things are going to cost, and I just think that is so wise to just look at the facts. And then once you did the math, you realize like, wow, this is just really beneficial. This is really beneficial all around. But you have to sit there and like look at the facts first. Like I think people just automatically assume, well, insurance is going to be really expensive if I'm not getting through my employer. Well, go look and see what it would cost. Like if you're making significantly more money, it might be worth it. And for you, Shelby, and for a lot of people, quality of life is like a thing.
Oh my gosh. Huge difference in quality of life. That's probably my biggest highlight is like that. Like I said, I just was in a point where I was like, I need a change for my life because this is just not working for me. It just was too much. And I think commuting too. I think when COVID happened, it opened a lot of people's eyes who were commuters, being like, how soul sucking is it to spend that much time on your commute every day? And some people are back to their commute. Some people love their commute. For me, with the hours that I was working plus a commute, and I had to like pay for parking every day, there was a lot of expenses with my commute that now I don't have to pay, but I put in other areas. So I'm saving a lot of money just by having, a 7-minute commute to my job right now. And not spending so much money on gas and parking. Like I have a parking lot at my current job. Like there wasn't a parking lot before. So, it was more like in a city. So I think there's a lot of give and take and there's a lot to consider and it's all very personalized. And I think you can't just take one person's situation to be like the end all be all or, it, there's a lot that goes into it. And this is my situation, but it could be very different from the next person. And like, yeah, when I'm married someday and I can jump on someone else's insurance, then that will be great. But we're not there yet. So
And we're
that's a lot of money to spend to get there. If we choose to do, a wedding and all that stuff, that's a whole other bowl of expenses there. So,
oh yes.
there's just different seasons of life. And right now I'm only 27 years old. So I'm just figuring it out.
Yeah. And like that's totally okay. And you're
Yeah.
also doing, you're doing your independent contracting, you're doing the Instagram and TPT thing. When you started that, did you have the intention of like, I know it was kind of your COVID project because you started it when the pandemic started. Was that kind of your intention with it to build it into a business, or were you like, let me just post some posts and make some reels and see what happens?
No, no. So during my CF, I live with one of my best friends. She is an SLP. Now she lives in San Diego. She's doing her SLP thing over there, which is awesome. And her and I would sit and I would be prepping, my Texas Speech Mom resources, or we would be looking at some SLP Instagrams. That was when I was first even realizing that there was an SLP Instagram world, like during my CF. And that's when I started, learning so much and finding activity ideas and blah, 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 all the things that now I try to do for others too, because I tried, you give back what you took away from it when it was really helpful for you. So, I just remember sitting with her and I would be like, oh my gosh, I could never have a TPT store. Like, are you kidding me? I could never create my own materials. And I think my biggest thing was there's already so much out there. I was just so intimidated, I guess, by that. It's like, how could I ever create something on my own? And how would I be able to know how to do that without making sure I'm not copying someone else or, I just, all of that scared the crap out of me. Copyright scared me so bad because I didn't know anything about it. And anything that you don't know about before you learn about it, it's scary. And I had no intentions of making an SLP Instagram, but everybody was looking for what to do at the beginning of COVID. And so, from March to April, I had been sharing on my personal Instagram for, my SLP friends from grad school, for the SLP coworkers, for, just my SLP friends kind of activity ideas and what we were doing. And at that time, it was like, even my non-SLP friends were like, oh, it's really cool to see, what speech therapists are having to do right now for their jobs. And I was on one of those fun beginning of COVID or not SLP happy hours with my friends on Zoom and my non-SLP friends on Zoom. And we were all kind of talking about like what we've been up to, and how our jobs have been and everything else. And my friends from college were actually the ones that were like, you should make a separate Instagram for your SLP stuff to share ideas on. And without them pushing me to do it, I wouldn't have done it. And like my sisters and my friends helped me come up with the name. Like they helped me figure it all out. And they were, like my first followers on the account. And then everything just kind of took off from there. I think just sharing teletherapy ideas is how I started to grow because there wasn't a lot out there. So I was kind of filling in a gap that wasn't there. And then I started having more of a relationship with Abby from Type B SLP. And I was talking to her more. And then her and Aaron from Speech Tea, they had that course, which they still have, and um, they're about to launch another one. By the time that this comes out, it will be out. But they do a course that teaches SLPs and educators, whoever, how to start and run a teachers pay teachers store, and how to create products, and how to do all of that. So they kind of talked to me about how they thought that I would be perfect for it, to learn about it, and they could see me doing that. And I was kind of like, are you really? Like, I was still like, I could never do that. I just didn't see myself creating materials. But I was like, okay. And so I was an affiliate for their course, and I got to take the course, and I loved it. I learned a lot from them, and I started a TPT store. I started my first resource, I think, was just a student info sheet. So I had to create one for myself, just like how I was going to organize my caseload that year. And then I was like, oh, I guess I could sell this. And I sold it, I just sell it for $1, like it's nothing crazy. But that was my first one. And then I just kind of started to try to create, once I had learned about all the things that were scaring me. So once I learned how to make sure that you're not copying someone else's ideas, like you can put in the search bar on Teachers Pay Teachers what you're thinking of making. And if you see it already done, then don't make it, unless you have like your own very original twist to put onto it. And I got to learn about copyright, and I learned the how and the like what to do, what not to do before I got started. And then, yeah, it just kind of took off from there. I had no idea that my Instagram would blow up the way that it did. Once it started to, I kind of had like a freak out, because it was one of those things. It was almost like cold feet, where it's like, oh, like I guess I committed to this, and now it's this thing, and I'm attached to it. Well, I can't walk away from it now. Like, okay, now that's part of my life. And I had like a mini freak out when that first happened. Obviously, you can always walk away from something if it's not serving you, but I was like, okay, I'm doing it. And now it's like second nature. I'm like, I'm just on my stories every day. I am just myself sharing my life as an SLP. That's kind of how it's always been, just sharing tips and tricks and products that I'm making, how I'm using them, things that I'm learning about. Yeah, so it's been a journey for sure.
But I think that's what people want to see, is like that authenticity. And I know we're getting a little bit away from the settings topic, but I do think, I have talked to SLPs who are like, how do I make it on Instagram? Which is really, it's really funny, like making it on Instagram.
Yeah.
But I think I really like what you said. Like a lot of it is just like genuinely just showing up as a genuine person. Like I feel like people can sniff out like a fake
Yes.
snail. Oh my goodness,
Yes.
a fake salesman a mile away. And just
Mm-hmm.
like showing up and being authentic, because this is not an easy job. And I mean, you mentioned earlier that like you were feeling burnout after your CF.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and
I
that is
cried
not a
so much.
rare thing. Like I hear those stories a lot, and just kind of coming to the table with just an open heart, an open mind. I think that, I mean, I really think you can't fake that. You can't buy that. Um,
Right.
you can't, a course isn't going to teach you how to do that. You just
No,
do the dang thing. Like
I
I had
think,
to throw that in.
yes, yes, that's your tagline. I think that and the 20-cent coffee. um, but I think as I'm sitting here and reflecting off of everything that I've just said, the theme for me is just diving in head first and seeing what happens. And if something is for you, it will work out. And if something is not, then it won't. But, like with my CF, I was just like, all right, let's try this and it will work or it won't. And I got to a point where after I tried really hard to make it work, I stayed there for 2 years. And I was just like, I've got to get out. I got to find something else. This is not for me. And in order to do that, I had to take a big leap of faith in order to make my Instagram, my Teachers Be Teacher store. It was all about just like taking the risk and seeing what it can turn into, really.
And just putting yourself out there. I think so many of us, you know, so many of us are like, okay, it has to be perfectly tailored before we put it out there. And which I mean, you don't want to put out a bunch of stinky crap. Like you want to put
Yeah.
out something decent. Okay. I'm not advocating for
Yes.
putting out a bunch of stanky stuff. But, at the end of the day, like you have to, there's that I can't talk today, that vulnerability piece
Mhm.
that is super important. And I think that people really it's relatable, honestly.
Right. I mean, I think it just is that whole thing about if you wait until you're ready, then you'll never start.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that you can do to try to get yourself ready. And even if you're not feeling 100% like, I feel like I've mastered this, you don't have to master something to start it. But if you have an idea and if you have the tools to get your idea out there, then you should just start. And I think that there's always a seat at the table as long as you're bringing something original to it.
Yes. And the thing is, like, no one else is you. So, like,
Yeah.
you are your original sauce, you are your secret sauce. And not, I think, like, people forget that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really easy to, I mean, even before when I was, thinking about, you had sent me some of your like go-to questions that sometimes you ask people, like what makes you unique as an SLP, and that question scare the crap out of me because I'm like, I don't know. I'm just like everybody else. And I was talking to an SLP friend and she was like, no, you're not. And she was able to tell me all of these things. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, we all do the same job, but we all bring our own originality too. And like, everyone can be doing the same thing, but everybody has a different story that goes along with it.
Yes, definitely. And so normally I kind of like round out interviews by asking, like, what's your piece of advice to people? But you've already given some really, really good advice. So I'm going to round it out with this question.
Okay.
Shelby, what would you tell your past self about, SLP, multiple streams of income, business, anything? Like if you could go back in time and tell yourself and like have a chat with yourself, maybe like when you were in your last year of grad school or something like that, like what would you like to tell yourself?
First of all, never say never because it will come back and haunt you. Because don't worry, that friend came back and said, remember when you said you would never do this? And here I am. But I think the biggest thing that I always say is that expect imposter syndrome when you're doing something new. Expect it and don't be afraid of it. Just know that it's okay to be like, yeah, this doesn't feel great. Like this kind of sucks right now. But you have support. Know who you can ask questions to. Know that there is this huge community of SLPs that give free information on Instagram. I mean, like, of course, with that, take everything with a grain of salt too, and always be doing your own learning. But I think for me, there's a few things like expect imposter syndrome, progress, not perfection. Just show up, give things a try. And it doesn't have to be all these absolutes. It doesn't have to be if you choose this, this is it for you. If you don't choose this, then you'll never get that opportunity again. Like that, it doesn't have to be that absolute, it doesn't have to be so black or white. It can be like you can always come back to something. But I think my biggest piece of advice would just to be give everything a try. And if you feel pulled towards something, then sit with that and figure out what you want to do and take the leap of faith.
Like
Take
instead
the
of like
risk.
being afraid of it, lean into it.
Yeah.
Because there's
And
there's a reason, there's a reason you want it. Like there's a
right.
reason that, there's a reason that you're feeling pulled towards something. And I don't know. I'm sure you feel the same way. Anytime I ignore that pull, the pull usually just gets even harder. And then, like, all the cosmic things in the
Yes.
universe line up. And instead of me choosing to go towards the pool, I get kicked in the rear end towards the pool.
Yes. And it's like we work way too hard to become SLPs, to be burned out and miserable in our job. And I know that there's seasons of being an SLP for sure. But if you're really miserable, the thing that I would just say is nothing changes if nothing changes, right? So you have to figure out what can you change? Like what is in your power to change and what isn't.
I have absolutely nothing else to add to that, Shelby.
Oh my God, did I leave you speechless?
That's pretty, I can talk a lot. Ask my husband. So,
Wow.
well, this has been an amazing conversation. I love that we got to talk about the topic we were planning on talking about, but we also just got into, which is another reason I love doing this show, just got into some real conversations about life, even, inside and outside of SLP. And I just greatly appreciate you coming on and taking your time to hang out with me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel like we had like a soul chat.
Yes, it's soul chats are the best people.
Yes.
Find some people you can have soul chats with.
Yes. And if anyone has any other questions for me, I try to do like a ask me anything question box on my Instagram at least once a week. And I'm pretty open to any and all questions. I'm a very big open book. And yeah, I'm happy to chat with anyone further if they have any more questions.
And yes, you can actually find all of Shelby's information in the show notes and your Instagram. Tell us your Instagram handle for everyone.
Shelby the SLP.
And you're Shelby with the LY.
LBY.
LBY. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
LBY.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But like I had a friend in grade school who she was a BIE. And then there was also
Oh.
BI. So that's what it was. Sorry. So Shelby with a BY.
Yes,
Yeah.
easy way to remember it is Shelby Ford, like the Shelby Ford Mustang for the car people. Yes. Sometimes I'll go to like give my credit card to pay for something. And like I've had this happen to me at Staples, McDonald's, anytime I go for a car service or anything like that, of course. But then there's the other times where it's like you don't expect it and you'll get they'll like take a double take at my car and they'll be like, "Were your parents car people?" I'm like, "Do you actually read the names of people's cars?" Never know until people ask, but that's always how I'm like, you can remember my name because just think of the Mustang.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, everyone, be sure to go check out Shelby if you are not already following her on Instagram. And the links to her Instagram and her TPT store, so you can go check out all of her fabulous things, are going to be in the show notes. And thank you so much, Shelby, for hanging out.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Be sure you are subscribed so you can continue to get more no fluff content from me. And I would really appreciate it if you took a small amount of time to leave a review for the podcast. It really helps to boost it in the search engines and ratings, and it allows me to continue to produce this content for you and get this message out there to other SLPs and healthcare professionals. And as always, happy wealth building and go do the dang thing.